Is this just your perfect prototypical oversold bounce setting up?
I think so. The technicals are never going to answer the question why something is happening. But last week we did get very oversold extremes in the market's internal measures. And by that, I mean breadth and sentiment and leadership and volume. All of those got to levels that we haven't seen in most cases since the COVID 2020 low, and some even before that. So yet we have a downtrend, it has a hold on the major indices. And so we want to make sure to have that framework when we're evaluating the short term, which does bode well for at least some stabilization, if not an oversold bounce in the major indices that could last, let's call it maybe 1 to 3 weeks or so, by the way our indicators set up. But that should be viewed as something that's counter trend.
Are we still in a longer or medium term downtrend overall, Katie, whatever happens today, tomorrow, or this week?
Yeah, it won't fix it. The oversold bounce is unlikely to be enough to impact our intermediate term and long-term momentum gauges, which are still very much pointing lower, and not just pointing lower, but diverging. The S&P 500 is down about 11% month to date. And with that, of course, you have very strong downside momentum. The signs of downside exhaustion that we cited are really only short-term in nature. So I think we assume that we'll see downside follow through beyond an oversold bounce or stabilization. The 38.15 level that we've been pretty vocal about as support, of course, has been taken out decisively. And with that, the next support becomes about 3,500 on the chart. We, of course, don't want to see that kind of downside follow through, but it seems likely by the way the indicators set up. And that, of course, means we'll also see downside from the likes of the NASDAQ 100. We're looking for mega caps to underperform during the next downdraft.
Underperform. So if people out there think this is the bottom, you're telling them think again.
I think so. We're looking for our indicators to get more constructive sometime closer to September or October. Of course, if it happens sooner, great, we'll react to it then. But as it stands in terms of just sort of average duration of the signals that we have, they do put us past the summer months. So I think we'll see somewhat of a difficult summer, some downside follow through, and perhaps even more difficult, maybe more sideways choppiness, during which there's really no directional bias. And that could become the stuff, of course, of a basing phase. We think, the higher growth arena, the small caps, they're more deeply oversold long term. So that's where we're going to start to watch for any kind of indications of a basing phase. And that's what we think is needed to restore confidence to this market.
Okay. I got to imagine 9 of your 10 clients are asking at least a little or a lot about Bitcoin, Katie. When you look at I don't know how well technicals work on Bitcoin, but assuming they do, when you look at Bitcoin, what do you see?
I think technicals are one of the only things that works on Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies at times. The supply-demand relationship is very deep and global. So we do have charts that are very sort of respectful of the technical indicators. And we've seen, just like equity markets, a series of breakdowns in the cryptocurrency arena, including Bitcoin, most recently below 27,200 support that we were watching. And that took it straight away to secondary support, which ranges down to about 18,300. So for Bitcoin, just like the equity market, we do look for a little stabilization just given the proximity of that support, but we're viewing it as counter trend, something that wouldn't be indicative of a buying opportunity because we think these bounces can be really difficult to time, but rather something that could provide sort of temporary relief from the downside momentum that we've seen. Unfortunately, with the proximity of that support level, it does suggest that we could see a breakdown on the back of near-term stabilization.
More breakdown possible on Bitcoin quickly?
That's right. Yeah. So beyond the very near term, we think that 18,300 could be at risk of a breakdown. And unfortunately, the next support below that is below 13,900. So we're talking about a big sort of vacuum to the next support levels for some of these.